A very good afternoon, everyone. Today we'll be discussing another very important module, that is the unit where we will be discussing about CSR. What is CSR? Why we will be study CSR? What is the importance of CSR? So we will in general discuss about CSR. We'll discuss about what is CSR, what is the overview of CSR, CSR from a shareholder to stakeholder primacy, stakeholder relation to the farm, stakeholders and the CSR, corporate citizenship and business. These are some of the points which we will be discussing in this unit. This is unit 5, where we will be discussing in general about what basically is CSR and its relationship towards the society and the business. We'll discuss about what basically is CSR, and we'll also discuss how we are navigating the normative challenges in modern business environment. So what is CSR? CSR refers to the ethical obligation of the companies to contribute positively towards the society and to the environment at large. In general, it is telling that when we are talking about CSR, we are talking about corporate social responsibility. Every organization has the CSR activities that are being undertaken. What basically it is? Now, it is basically the obligation, that is the ethical obligation of the company towards the society and the environment, because if we are not contributing towards the society, our business will not be sustainable. This is what we have also discussed in our previous class. The purpose of CSR is basically balancing the business objectives with the social and environmental considerations. When I talk about balancing the business objectives, what is the business objective? One of the important primary objective of every business undertaking is profit generation. So we cannot only concentrate on profit for undertaking the business or for making our business sustainable. We have to also take into consideration the society, the impact that we are making in the society, and we need to take into consideration different important environmental considerations, because if we are avoiding the environment, we cannot accustom with ourselves with the changes of the environment or of the organization. So the purpose of CSR is basically we need to balance the business objectives, that is the profit generation, along with the social and the environmental considerations. There are different important contexts that is being used previously, that is called as the historical context. There we have two important focus. One is the traditional focus and second one is the shift in focus. In traditional focus, it is being identified that business historically has centered on maximizing shareholder value. Beforehand, we were only discussing about businesses as profit. That is how our shareholder value can be maximized. But now the focus has shifted to emergence of CSR as business expanded and the stakeholder perspective gained importance. So we are incorporating CSR activities into businesses such that we can expand our business, we can grow our business, and we are also incorporating stakeholders perspective, which is also gaining importance. So both the CSR along with the stakeholder perspective is being taken into consideration. Now, what is the stakeholder concept? The definition of the stakeholders are nothing but the individuals or the groups who are affected or can affect the operations of a business. When I talk about business, I talk about the business operations of business with whom? Who are responsible for the businesses? The employees who are working in the organization, the customers to whom we are feeding, the suppliers from where we are getting the product, and the community and at large. The complexity is we need to manage the diverse interests, because employees have their own interests, customers have their own interests, suppliers have their own interest, and community have their own interest. So the complexity, the problem is, the issue is we have to manage the diverse interest and expectations of the multiple stakeholders, and it is a very difficult and a challenging job for every business individual. So when we are talking about CSR, which is being incorporated, which is in practice, we talk about engagement strategies. Here we discuss how businesses interact with the stakeholders. Who are the stakeholders? How are we going to interact with the stakeholders? Through regular communication, through the feedback that they provide, and we incorporate the feedback into our system, and we see how the changes can be incorporated. So some of the examples of the CSR initiatives include environmental, different types of environmental sustainability programs, ethical labor practices, community development projects that are being carried out by the companies in different important villages or different important areas. Now, what is the benefit of this CSR? Benefit of the CSR can be to two. One is for conduction of the businesses very effectively, and for the stakeholders also. For when we are talking about the benefits of the CSR, how it is benefiting for businesses, there it gives rise to enhanced reputation. Your reputation is increased because you are contributing, you are doing something for the society. People know you of the activities that you undertake. Then for another is customer loyalty. You become loyal to your customer. Risk management is also there when we are talking about CSR, because we can apprehend the problem and we have sort it out then and there, so that it doesn't go into a bigger ship. And what type of benefit it is CSR is providing for the stakeholder? There is an improved community relations, there is better working conditions for, because the employees get themselves involved in different types of decision making activities. Employees are being provided with different types of benefits which they are demanding or which they want, and that the employers are providing them, and different and they are also it also gives rise to environmental protection. Now, what are the challenges in CSR? Now, one of the major important challenge that we have already discussed is the balancing the interest of the stakeholders. Now, we need to take into consideration the profitability. We need to take into consideration the goals. Along with it, we have to take into consideration the stakeholders' expectations. So we cannot avoid generation of profit. We can neither avoid the expectations which our stakeholders are expecting from us. So one of the important challenge of CSR is balancing of the interest. That is, balancing of the interest is nothing but aligning of the business goals with the stakeholders expectations. Another important challenge is we go for evaluating the impact and effectiveness of CSR initiatives. Evaluating the impact and effectiveness of CSR initiatives. Whatever CSR activities we are undertaking, we need to evaluate, and evaluating its importance is a very difficult task, and evaluating the effectiveness also is a very, how much we are effective, are we benefiting to the mark, up to the mark, to the people or not. That measurement is very important and very difficult. Another important challenge is resource allocation, wherein we need to manage the cost associated with CSR efforts. So we have to manage the cost. So these are three important challenges that have been faced by that are faced in CSR. One is we need to balance the interest. Second is we need to evaluate the impact and effectiveness of CSR initiative, that is measurement. And third is we have to go for effective resource allocation, wherein we go for managing the cost associated with CSR effort. Now comes the role of the manager. What is the role of the manager? Role of the manager is understanding the stakeholders. You have to understand what the stakeholders are expecting from you. So you have to go for identifying and addressing the needs of the stakeholders and the concerns of the various groups who are involved in different activities. Second important role of the manager here is you have to maintain transparency. That is, communication has to be open. You have to engage transparently with the employees or with the people, and you have to you have your communication has to be strong with the stakeholders also, because the stakeholders should also know what is going to happen, what you are doing, how you are addressing, what type of incorporations you are doing towards by implementing CSR, so on and so forth. Now, we will discuss what are the responsibilities of the stakeholders. The responsibilities of the stakeholders can be considered taking into consideration the acknowledgement and the contribution. When I talk about recognizing the efforts of business and understanding the broader implications. And when I talk broader means we have to recognize the efforts of the business that the people are undertaking, and we also need to understand the broader implications. Second is contribution, wherein there should be participation in the dialogues and the initiatives that will support the stakeholders' goals. Now, there are different important case studies. Suppose there are different important companies who are putting forward different important approaches to CSR and its impact, and there are different important companies also who are also taking into consideration the stakeholder engagement practices, such that they can contribute towards the business and can contribute towards the stakeholders' interest. The future trends in CSR include. So future trends in CSR include there should be increased transparency. That is, there should be demand for more detailed reporting and accountability. Now, when I am talking about CSR, it is corporate social responsibility. That is the responsibility that I have towards the society. But when we are talking about responsibility, it doesn't end there. We have to again go for reporting and accountability. Are the responsibility that are being taken by the corporates, are the corporates accountable for whatever responsibility they have taken? So we have to go for judging it. Next is we need to go for integration with the core businesses. That is, CSR is becoming integral to business strategy rather than it is considered as a separate function, because whenever you are talking about business, you are talking about profit, you are talking about society. So here the future trend in CSR would suggest that there is integration of CSR with core businesses, wherein we are integrating CSR into business strategies, business activities, rather than considering it to be a separate function. Now we'll discuss the evolution and the challenges of CSR. Now, when I am talking about CSR, I am again taking into consideration the point, the fact, the period of industrial revolution to the modern day practices which are followed. So in this context, when I talk about CSR, it is the commitment of the businesses to act ethically, thus contributing to societal and environmental benefit or environmental well-being. So when we are talking about CSR, it is the commitment of businesses to act ethically. Every business should have a commitment towards the business, towards the organization. So when I talk about CSR here, I talk about the commitment of the business to act ethically, thus contributing to societal and environmental well-being. What is the objective? What should be the objective of CSR? That is addressing the negative side of the business practices through responsible actions. When I'm undertaking, for example, I'm undertaking the business. While undertaking the business, I am entering into manufacturing process and I am polluting the environment. When I pollute the environment, obviously the society will complain about the pollution, but I should be ready about with the different type of strategies such that I can combat it, such that I can reduce it, such that I can address it. So another important one of the important objective of CSR is addressing the negative side of business practices through responsible actions. Now, what is the role of corporations in the society? Two important impact we can discuss under it. One is the economic impact, another one is the social impact. When I'm talking about the economic impact, I'm talking about corporations have driven material well-being and significant wealth creation. So we have lot many companies. Many companies they are earning good profit. So corporations are driven material well-being and significant wealth creation. Second is the social impact, that is the side effects that one has to take into consideration, which might include environmental damage, labor issues, and ethical considerations. Labor issues and ethical considerations. Now, there are different important challenges. One of the important challenge for CSR is the normative challenges. Normative challenge. Now, here CSR poses as a normative challenge, demanding the business should act responsibility towards the society as a whole and specific stakeholder groups. So if your business is not behaving responsibility towards the society and it is not in a position to address the stakeholders interest, then it will create problem. So what is the problem? Problem is we have to balance this profit with the ethical responsibilities and the stakeholders expectations. Another important historical view of CSR can be discussed here as in earlier times or early practices, initial CSR efforts are focused on philanthropy and employee welfare. Early practices. During industrial evolution, there is emergence of welfare movements because when there was industrial evolutions, there were many companies, many people have come into picture, so their welfare has was being demanded by the employees. So there is emergence of welfare movements and early reform efforts in response to labor conditions and social issues. So that is the reason why people demanded that when there are number of companies, when there was an increase in the labor, when there is a requirement of the labor, then their safety, their security again came into picture during industrial revolution. There are major phases of CSR development. These phases can be taken into consideration as four. The first important phase of CSR development, we have to discuss how we can develop the CSR. One is the profit maximization phase. Here, the initial focus is on wealth maximization or wealth creation and increasing the value of the shareholder. How can you increase the value of the shareholder? The value of the shareholder can increase when there is increase in profit. Second important phase is the trusteeship phase. Here, the manager become responsible for addressing the stakeholder claims. Third one is the philanthropy phase. In philanthropy phase, corporate contributions and charitable activities are considered as central to the CSR, wherein the corporate contributions that they are doing towards the society and different type of charitable activities which they are taking, which they are undertaking for the benefit of the society act as the central element. Next important phase is the stakeholder concern phase, where there is a shift to addressing the interest of all the stakeholders and not just only shareholders. So there are different important key CSR issues and cases. One of the historical issue is unsafe labor practices. For example, that we have experienced in Bangladesh garment industry and the child labor, environmental pollution, so on and so forth. So modern issue is what? Now there is labor unrest in industries. Waste management practices could not be implemented effectively. Nuclear power concerns are again creating problems in the society, and there is problem in maintaining privacy in social media. So, what is the impact of the CSR on business and society? When I'm talking about the impact of CSR in business and society, I take into consideration the positive contribution. Positive contribution involves improved labor practices. We go for labor practices, incorporating labor practices, which is improved. Why? Because we are doing something for the labor, we are putting on the effort. How our employees will be satisfied, then they can contribute effectively and efficiently towards the organization. Then we have the environmental sustainability, and then we have different important community development programs that are being incorporated. But there are different important challenges to this. One of the important challenges is managing the stakeholders' expectations, which always increases, and balancing of the profit with the ethical practices becomes a important issue, important challenge when we are talking about CSR, impact of CSR on business and society. There are different important examples which we can cite for CSR in action. The first one is the response to unsafe practices that are being followed in Bangladesh garment industry. Second is the labor unrest resolution in the automobile industry. And third one is the initiatives to prevent the environmental damage and manage the waste of the factory or industry. Now, when we are talking about the future of CSR, now we have already discussed that CSR has been shifted from companies through ages. So one of the important trend is that we will be discussing under this future of CSR is there is increased transparency, because if transparency could not be maintained, then businesses cannot be undertaken in the long run. So what we have to do now, we have to go for increase in transparency. Next is there should be integration of the CSR practices. It should not be considered as alone. Rather, it should be integrated with the core business strategy, and there should be enhancement of the stakeholder engagement. Second is the ongoing challenge that everyone is facing nowadays, relating to the society again, wherein we need to go for adapting to evolving societal expectations and regulatory requirements, because whenever we are undertaking the business, there is government, there is law. We have to carry forward the activities, the CSR activities, depending upon the law, and we have to undertake our business. So now we'll discuss the evolution of CSR from the stakeholder or shareholder to the stakeholder primacy. So when we are talking about this, we need to here understand what basically is CSR, and the shift of the CSR from the shareholder to the stakeholder primacy. And the objective here is to understand how the concept of responsibility in corporations how the concept of responsibility in corporations has evolved. So starting with what basically is shareholder primacy, here the focus is on maximizing shareholder value as the primary goal of corporations. So when I'm talking about shareholder primacy is nothing but focusing on maximizing the value of the shareholder, which is the primary goal of industries or corporations. Now, when we are talking about the historical context, it is the profit-driven mindset that is based on the shareholders' interest. Now, when I'm talking about shareholders' interest, obviously every shareholder wants profit, and they worked only for getting the profit, and only getting the profit was the motto of the businesses that they are undertaking. Now, what is the challenge? Challenge is we are neglecting the social responsibilities and resistance to CSR. There are certain companies who say that why will we do these activities? What is the impact it is going to make? How much money will be involved in doing it, so on and so forth. So one of the important challenges, we neglect the social responsibility, and we also face the resistance to CSR initiatives that are being that should be taken by the company for its businesses to be undertaken in the long run. Now, beforehand, there were criticisms and effort and support. One of the important criticism is economists and the business leaders who believed in market efficiency over managerial responsibility. Now, what is the supporters' view? Supporters' view is shareholders' primacy proponents who opposed the CSR and the corporate welfare. According to Peter F. Drucker, there should be compatibility. In 1954, he has given the concept that there should be compatibility. There is the balance should be maintained between the profitability and the social responsibility. We cannot always go for profit making. We cannot always go for social responsibility. Rather, a balance, or rather a compatibility has to be developed between the profitability and social responsibility. So here the concept is we need to turn the social problems into economic opportunities and thus enhancing human competency, because if the human competency level is increased, then your activities relating to everything like say CSR activities or different business activities also increases. Now we discuss how the evolution towards the CSR. Now, what is the modern acceptance? Modern acceptance is there is increasing recognition that satisfying social interest can enhance shareholder value. If you can satisfy the social interest, you can enrich on your shareholders value, because if you are doing something for the society, you are contributing something to the society that again is being impacted in the businesses, that is, so it will create value, it not only for the shareholder but also that is for the business at large. Now, long-term perspective is we have to balance between the short-term profit along with the long-term sustainability. So, if this balance with the profit and sustainability won't be there, your business your business cannot be undertaken in the long run. Now, there is a shift to shareholder primacy. We have already discussed what basically is shareholder primacy. When we talk about shareholder primacy, we are emphasizing on creating value for all the stakeholders and not only the shareholders. Here the historical context is the concept of stakeholders was first used in the year 1963, and that is being evolved from earlier ideas of constituencies, which is being put forwarded by Freeman in 1984. According to the stakeholder theory, the purpose of the firm is connection of various individuals or groups affected by the firm's activity. And now what is this managerial duty? It is expanding from fiduciary duties towards the shareholders to a broader responsibilities to all the stakeholders. Now, what is the benefit of this stakeholder perspective? There are three important benefits of the stakeholder perspective. One is there is value creation. Second is there is strategic management and in the businesses. Third is corporate success. When I talk about value creation, we are focusing on maximizing contributions from all the stakeholders. When I talk about strategic management, I talk about new outlook on managing relationship and responsibilities. When I talk about corporate success, I talk about recognition that long-term success depends on stakeholder satisfaction, because if the stakeholders are not satisfied, then they may not go for businesses in the long run, and as a result of which they may be a loss. Now how are we going for implementing this implementing these challenges? The first and very important element that we can talk about is we have to balance the interest. How are we, what are the different important what are the different important interest of the people, interest of the employees, interest of the stakeholders. So there is a very much, there is a very big difficulty in addressing and balancing the diverse stakeholders interest. So you have to understand it, you have to implement the strategies, how those elements can be incorporated. It's a very difficult task. Second is the governance issues. When I talk about it, it is nothing but the potential complications in stakeholder representation and its impact on the corporate governance. When I talk about corporate governance, I talk about how are you governing the companies at large, so that it becomes an issue, it becomes a problem. Third important challenge is the economic impact, wherein we go for addressing the concerns about how inclusive government might impact or might affect the economic performance. Discussing about the inclusiveness nature of CSR, one of the broadening scope of it is CSR's evolution towards encompassing a wider range of social element. So when I'm talking about it, we are talking about how we are going to incorporate the strategies such that we can encompass a wide range of social activities into the organization, and how we can increase our businesses in the how we can increase our businesses in the long run. Now, there are different important case studies that are being discussed on CSR. One of the important case study is the Pentagonia's environmental and the social initiatives. Here it has addressed, or it has given rise to balancing of the profit with the environment and the social responsibilities. Second important case study is on Ben and Jerry's commitment to social causes. Ben and Jerry's commitment to social causes, where we are discussing about integrating the stakeholder interest into business practices. Because if the stakeholders are incorporating certain strategies or certain or are demanding something, they are the people who are into the businesses, who are doing the work on in the platform, and they can better make us understand how to carry forward the business so that it can be a sustainable one. So here in this case, it is providing information about how we can integrate the stakeholders interest into the business practices. Third important case study is on Unilever Sustainable Living Plan. Here we are focusing on long-term sustainability and stakeholder value. So we are not denying the fact that sustainability of the business is required, but we cannot only concentrate on the sustainability part. We have to also see that how we can go for increasing the how we can go for increasing the stakeholder value. Now we'll discuss now about the discretionary CSR and its benefit. Now, what basically is discretionary CSR? Discretionary CSR involves voluntary actions that are taken by the firms beyond the legal requirements to the benefits of the society. So, when we are talking about CSR, we are in general talking how and what type of benefits we can provide towards the society. But when we are talking about discretionary CSR, it is involving the different type of voluntary actions that are taken by the firms, which is beyond the law and which is beyond the benefit of the society. So we are discussing on a point which will benefit us in creating the value for not only the stakeholders, but also it increases or enhances the corporate reputation. According to Windsor's perspective in 2006, discretionary CSR represents a wealth transfer from the investors who are investing money to the society at large. So, what basically is shareholder primacy and CSR? Now, in shareholder primacy, there is focus on maximizing the shareholder value, often at the expense of broader responsibility. Second is there is economic versus ethical responsibility, wherein Windsor argues that ethical and economic responsibilities are not always aligned. So, what is the benefit of cost and benefit of CSR? According to Mac Williams and Siegel in 2001, they have pointed out that CSR can lead to higher cost. CSR can lead to higher cost. And when I talk about higher cost, yes, cost is involved in undertaking these activities, and but whatever cost you will be investing or whatever amount you will be investing, you will be getting more return of the investment that you do, and there are different important competitive disadvantages. When I talk about the cost benefit analysis, the firm should balance between the CSR cost with the potential revenue increases and reputation benefit. Because if you go on creating the reputation or increasing the value without understanding the importance, then again it will create a problem. So when we go for cost benefit analysis, it identifies that the firm should balance the CSR cost with the potential revenue increase and the reputation benefit. Coming to the social cost and the benefit curve. Now, the expenditures that are associated with CSR activities should be justified if they lead to increased sales. If you are doing certain activity that is relating to CSR and it is contributing towards the increase in sales, you have to justify it. The commitments that you are doing to the people, that you have to justify, and the employee competency that is being created. So then it include. So when we are talking about it, we are talking about the representation of the social cost curve that is cutting with the social benefit curve. So coming to the voluntary nature of CSR, when I talk about the voluntary nature of CSR, we talk about the voluntary activity. When I talk about voluntary activity, it is suggesting that CSR is not mandatory. It is driven by the firm's core values and objectives. Second important nature of CSR is it is contributing towards decision making. The managers make social investment decisions based on the firm's value and the available resource. So you cannot go out of it. You have to contribute towards the CSR activities. So when we are talking about the voluntary nature of CSR, through CSR we go for voluntary activity. And here when we are talking about voluntary activity, it is driving the firm from the core values and objectives towards the benefit of the society. And here when I'm talking about decision decision making. I'm talking about the managers make social investment decisions such that their business can be sustainable, and it is based on the firm's values and available resources. Now, coming to the resource allocation in CSR, the managers have the discretion in allocating resources for the CSR initiative. But the challenge is we have to balance the limited resources across a wide range of possible investments, because when I'm talking about business, it is not only one activity that we do. We are involving different types of activities, and different majority of the activities involves investment. So what I have to do is I need to balance between the limited resources available with me with a wide range of possible investors. Now we are talking about stakeholder approach and resource allocation. There is both positive and negative influence, where stakeholders can either support or hinder the firm's goal. Second problem is the resource allocation problem. There is also difficulty in responding to all the stakeholders' needs effectively. So now we'll discuss about stakeholder interest and economic surplus. Stakeholder interest and economic surplus. When I'm talking about stakeholder interest and economic surplus, I am talking about balancing the stakeholder interest. For example, the trade-offs between the creditors, the employees, the suppliers, and the consumers. So according to Husseini Brenner, in 1992, there is application of Satai's analytic hierarchy process to prioritize the stakeholders' claim. Now, one of the example we can cite from the pharmaceutical industry, wherein the pharmaceutical industry, they adjust the drug prices to benefit certain stakeholders, thus impacting other regions. The implication is there is a challenge in balancing the needs of the multiple stakeholders. There is a challenging in balancing the needs of the multiple stakeholders. Next is community norms and discretionary CSR. In community norms, it influences on who is considered as your stakeholder. Community norms means it impacts that who is considered as your stakeholder. Discretionary domain is managers have the power to choose, has the freedom to choose their stakeholders based on core values and competencies. Now, what you have to do when you are undertaking the business and when you are choosing your stakeholders, it has to match with the businesses, or it has to match with the values of the organization, because it becomes again a very difficult task to create a balance. Now, when I'm talking about core competencies and CSR alignment, when I'm talking about core competencies, I'm talking about those unique capabilities that an individual that an organization is having, and that gives a firm a competitive advantage. So what is the alignment here? The social investment should align with the firm's core competencies. Then only your business will be increased. So social investment should align with the firm's core competencies and strategic objectives. There are different important examples of core competencies there are different important examples of core competencies in CSR. The first important example is of the drug companies. When I'm talking about the drug companies, I'm talking about there is a focus on health related social investment. The disaster relief, where firms with disaster response capabilities can provide immediate assistance to the people who are facing difficulty. Next is we have the water bottling companies. There is supply of fresh waters in the areas that is affected by natural disasters like drought, like a flood, so on and so forth. Now we'll discuss about what basically is a is the role of stakeholders in driving the CSR activities. Yeah, our objective is to understand the evolution of stakeholder of the CSR from the stakeholders and the role of the government and agencies like say NGOs. So the stakeholder concept is being provided by Freeman in 1984. He has put forwarded or he has introduced the concept of stakeholder framework. The purpose of the firm is we need to align with the interest of the individuals and the groups affected by the firm. The key stakeholders here would be the managers, the customers, the suppliers, the employees, the local communities, the media, the government, so on and so forth. So what is this can be understood if you can understand about the ethical consumerism. So what is ethical consumerism? Ethical consumerism is nothing but personal consumerism or personal consumption patterns that is based on ethical considerations. So if you are managed from you have managed yourself, you can manage the activity, you can manage the business, you can manage the people, so on. So when I'm talking about ethical consumerism, first and foremost is I have to accept what basically ethics. I have to adjust whatever activity I am doing. I am doing it ethically. Second important element is the historical shift, wherein there is a shift from product quality to production processes, working conditions, and environmental impact. Now, we'll discuss about this consumer sovereignty, where there is impact of consumer preferences on the corporate behavior. Impact of consumer preferences on the corporate behavior. If your product is good, your customers will be preferring your product for the long time. There are different important case studies in ethical consumerism. The first one is the South Africa and the apartheid, where there is consumer boycotts leading to corporate exits. The Vietnam War and the Dow Chemical, where there is public pressure leading to changes in corporate practices. Second is Greenpeace and Shell, where there is environmental activism impacting corporate sales. Now, what is the reality of this ethical consumerism? According to the European study in 2004, there is discrepancy between the consumer attitude and actual behavior. There is a difference between the consumer attitude and actual behavior. Next is the consumer consciousness. When I'm talking about consciousness, only a small percent will actively modify the purchases based on ethical concerns. The impact on the market is the ethical branding role is in accordance with the customer's choice. Next is the corporate responses. Next is the corporate responses to ethical consumerism. We can discuss this if we can understand what basically is ethical branding. The different important companies like Ben and Jerry's, the Body Shop, the Innocent Drinks, the Toyota Pyrus. The challenge is there is competition and authenticity in ethical branding. The government plays a very important role in incorporating the CSR. So, what we'll discuss what is the role of the government in incorporating CSR. Now, yes, government plays a major important role because if you are not dedicated towards the government or you are not inclined towards the government, then the government is also not going to impact you, not going to help you out. So what you have to do now, here the government is encouraging CSR through endorsements, partnerships, and framework. Government is joining hands with the private parties to undertake the businesses or undertake the CSR activities. For example, the UK's Minister for CSR, the PPPs, there is the public-private partnership in India, the initiative of unemployment and training.